This project is supported, in part, by a grant from the Chatham Cultural Council. Everything told of the sea, even when we did not see its waste or hear its roar. For birds there were gulls, and for carts in the fields, boats turned bottom upward against the house. Sometimes the rib of a whale was woven into the fence by the roadside. The shores are more fertile than the dry land. The inhabitants measure their crops not only by bushels of corn, but by barrels of clams. Henry David Thoreau.
The first lobstermen in New England were the Native Americans. In Plymouth, the Pilgrims first reported that the Indians used lobsters as bait for fishing, as food when they could not get bass or cod, and even as fertilizer for crops. Early explorers, such as John Smith and Miles Standish, noted that the lobsters were so plentiful one could just walk the shore and gather them without even getting wet. In fact, after storms, they were sometimes washed ashore into piles 2 feet deep. Lobsters were even reported up to 5 feet long in the markets of Boston. Despite this abundance, lobstering as an industry was not possible until the 18th century, when transport vessels with seawater tanks in their hold, called lobster smacks, began to deliver them live to people inland. Unlike other kinds of fish, lobsters must be shipped alive. Uncooked, dead lobsters develop poisonous toxins that are deadly to eat. After World War I, gas engines replaced sails on the lobster boats. Electronic navigation gear and trap haulers took much of the manual labor out of lobstering, making the process much more efficient. On Cape Cod today, lobstermen take day trips, working alone or in pairs in 30 or 40-foot boats close to shore. "25-year-old Ben Berquist is one of the dozen or so commercial lobstermen in Chatham. This is his first year as captain. He grew up here, went off to college, and returned to take over his father's boat, the Benjo. His father runs the fish market at the pier, where he takes in his daily catch. He wakes up each morning around 5 a.m., rechecks the weather for high winds and rough seas, dresses, and heads out into the harbor. His sternman, Doug Seufert, is there to meet him on the dock. They swap whatever new weather information they have, load up their bait, tools, and lunch, and point the Benjo out into the gray waters of the Atlantic. Like other morning commuters, Ben sometimes feels that just getting to work is the hardest part of the day.
In the summer here, we have a lot of fog, and just getting in and out of the harbor every morning is a pain. And once you're out, trying to find all the buoys and where the radar and stuff, and that's a major headache. Being your own boss is great, but it's also bad because there's no one to kick you in the butt to say, you got to go to work today. You know, it's all up to you. I mean, I can roll over and say, I don't want to go, but if you have enough debt, it keeps you in the right direction, you know.
The houses on the shore are still and quiet. Just a few feet offshore, the waters of the channel are filled with activity. The Benjo slides into the watchful eye of Chatham Light, leaving the safety of the harbor and approaching open ocean. Today, the ride out is pretty choppy, but Sternman Doug wouldn't trade this for anything.
We'll watch the sun come up right about usually as we're steaming out. You know, it's just like steaming right into the sunrise. Scenes like that is definitely one of the reasons you love doing it. Just starting a day like that rather than you think about people that are starting a day in their cars sitting in traffic waiting to get, you know, past Braintree on Route 93 or something. And if I could think of two ways of commuting to work, I think I'd take the way I do it. Although some days when you're steaming into like 4 or 5 foot waves, those aren't good days for commuting, but still.
On a good day, you can see for 17 miles or so. Today we're 19 miles out, just beyond sight of land. The bait is laid out along with the tools and bands. Seawater is pumped into the live tank.
We'll usually hit our trawls probably by 6 o'clock easy, 5:30, 6 o'clock. When we get out to the gear, Ben's thinking about which way the tide's running. We hook up the north end, Ben steams the boat up along the north end stick and trailer buoy. We pick that up. Ben takes the line, puts it over the davit block, down around and into the hauler, brings the end line on. If it's got a little overgrown with posies or something, he'll run it down with a bait bag, old used bait bag. First pot comes up, anchor pot. He lands the pot up on the rail, gets the hauler, puts it in neutral, gets ready, make sure the ground line's going straight out, make sure he doesn't want to be over top of the ground line, and puts the hauler back on. Meanwhile, I'm about doing my business back aft, you know, cleaning the pot out and getting the lobsters out. We'll get sea urchins, sea clams, moon snails, all sorts of snails, hermit crabs, sand crabs, sand dollars, rock crabs. We get sea bass, ling, perch, sculpins. In the fall and spring we get codfish, market and scrod size. I've seen all sorts of stuff. I got a full Budweiser once way offshore. How, I don't know, because I would think it would float in the middle of a trawl.
They even throw back many of the lobsters. Small ones and egg-bearing females by state law must be thrown back. Eggers, as they are called, can carry between 7 and 70,000 eggs. Although only a small fraction of these eggs will reach adulthood, lobstermen do all they can to return them without damaging their valuable cargo. Though they pull lobsters from the pots quickly and efficiently, a close look reveals that the turn of their wrist ensures that they hit the water with their legs up so as not to detach the eggs. This skill is a trademark of a seasoned lobsterman. In fact, without it, there wouldn't be any lobsters, or a Benjo for that matter. Lobsters live primarily between Cape Hatteras and the coast of Labrador. In the waters of New England, they are a dark greenish blue and don't take on their bright red coloration until cooked and prepared with corn and steamers on the side. They usually prefer hard, rocky bottoms with kelp or seaweed where they can hide from the predators or lay in wait for their own prey. They'll eat just about anything: fish, shellfish, crabs, algae, and at times, even other lobsters. One of their claws, the big one, is called the crusher claw, for obvious reasons. The smaller, thinner one is the ripper claw. A lobster that has lost one of its claws is called a cull. One that has lost both of its claws is called a bull or a bullet. Sight is the poorest of their senses. The lobster's real eyes are its antennae, and the thousands of little hairs on its body. Lobsters cannot actually see the bait in the trap. They either bump into the trap in their movement on the ocean floor, or they pick up the scent of bait from upstream.
All right, this is your basic half-round lobster pot. It's got 6 bricks. It's made for fishing in open water. This is your kitchen end. This is the end the lobster's obviously gonna climb into. You got your kitchen ring. This is your parlor end. We use bait bags, so we would have our bait bag rung through one of these meshes up here, wrapped around this door, this hinge on this door, and the bait would be hanging down here. So if the pot was on the bottom, this would be the bottom, obviously, of runners and our bricks keeping it on the bottom. The lobster would come in, see the bait, climb up into this parlor end, and eventually work its way into the parlor end, at which point it's usually caught and doesn't make any effort or to retrieve and to get out. I'm not really sure if it's because the animal has the brain size of a blade of grass, or it's just in there because it's so comfortable. I know lobsters, I'm told, like dark crevices and like to hide in little caves and stuff.
On a typical day, Ben and Doug bring up about 200 pots, about 15 on each line. They have 750 traps all told, and every week, weather permitting, they empty and rebait each one of them, one by one.
You know, fishing on the water is always, it's interesting because it's never the same, you know, so there's always something that, you know, on a smooth day, we can leave at 5 and be in by noontime, you know, and that's with steam time in between gear. So it can go real quick or it can go real slow, like after the storm. We had a lot of, like, tangles with the gear and a lot of, you know, repairs to do and stuff like that.
While Doug splices lines and resets the traps, Ben navigates the Benjo around the next radar-equipped yellow buoy. This far out, the ocean is gray and featureless, but he uses every tool at his disposal. He relies most on his own memory and intuition and on information passed down from his father's experience in these waters. A depth finder helps him see the alternating holes and hills of the ocean floor. A Loran helps him find his way to and from the fishing grounds and helps him locate and place each string of traps. Even with all this technology on his side, Ben must be constantly aware of the expanse of ocean around him. To the observer, pulling and emptying the traps appears to be a mindless routine. But the lobsterman is thinking about where to place his traps for the best catch and how to decrease his trap losses and entanglements. With every haul, he hungrily updates his knowledge of the ocean floor, the habits of the lobster, the changes in the weather, and the movements of the other boats around him.
All along I'm thinking what I have to do. I'm thinking in my head, is there a pile of lobsters back there I gotta keep banding? Do I gotta cover them with burlaps to keep them from snapping each other's, you know, calling each other? I'm thinking, you know, how much bait do I have? Am I gonna have enough bait? Should I be baiting heavy or should I be baiting light? You know, or am I gonna have enough bait to get through the day? Should I save all of the bait I could possibly save? On a rough day, I'm thinking, you know, how can I conserve my energy every time I go around this rail? I want to time the waves, so when I'm not pushing the pot up a rail, so when the wave's going down, I want to be going down the rail with the wave. At all times, you got to be aware because it is dangerous. You always got to be aware of the line on the deck. It doesn't take much, you know, to take a wrap on your ankle or something, and that's a nasty thing. One's always thinking about what the other one's doing, especially on the water. You got to be conscious of how the other person, you know, is feeling, and if they're all 100% that day or whatever, because one day you'll pick up the slack for that person, or that person will pick up the slack for you. You know, one's right hand and one's left hand. Abbott and Costello. In total, it's always 100%.
After the last trap, Doug begins scrubbing the boat with seawater and a stiff brush, while the captain heads the Benjo back into harbor. All of the lobsters have had their claws banded and are transferred to a live tank. When they hit the markets in Chatham, they will again be transferred into salt water, so that by the time they are purchased and cooked, the lobsters will only have spent a matter of minutes out of the water. Unlike other fish stocks, lobster populations off Cape Cod have been relatively stable, although they too can be overfished.
I mean, it's been more regulated since the beginning, so it's in a better situation than a lot of the codfish, where they were just completely wiped out with no regulations, and now, after the fact, they're trying to make up rules and stuff to bring it back. So I feel pretty good about the lobster stock now, but you know, I'm just getting into it, so I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible, not to shoot myself in the foot, you know.
The Benjo first slides by the breakers and shoals of Monomoy off on the port side. Then the steady blinking of Chatham light welcomes us back into the harbor. As they tie up, Ben's dad, Paul, is there to receive their catch for his harborside fish market. This is a convenient arrangement for both of them. They're weighed and sorted. Customers are at the counter even as the lobsters are carried in the door. Ben is already planning the next day. How much bait they'll need to scrounge, what the weather has in store for them. His job is in many ways one that never ends. But as a college graduate with lots of other interests, Ben hardly feels as though he has no alternatives. Lobstering is a choice.
It's always been in the back of my head since I was little. I always loved it. You know, I thought it was a neat way to do it. But I never, you know, my education in college was outdoor education, so I went a totally different direction. But I'm glad I did, you know. So I have something to fall back on. If fishing goes belly up, then I've got somewhere to go. I know something different, you know. I love it. Yeah, it's healthy. It's a healthy lifestyle, to rephrase it.